Hey there, Heather, hello there. It's Jeff Cutter. I haven't welcome you to another CFL video, and we are talking Montreal Alouettes. Or at least I thought I was talking Montreal Alouettes. My shirt's inside out. Well, you know, that was not on purpose. I thought I did my shirt right side up. How fast it goes. That wasn't meant to be a joke or anything. That was real life. It's saying, fuck me. All right. Anyway, we're doing the Montreal Alouettes. So, of course, we're wearing the Alouette shirt because we're going to be talking about the top 10 CFL upsets of all time. And this will kind of end the CFL version of top 10 videos. So I can't think of anything else. I've done Grey Cups, I've done the best teams, I've done the worst teams, I've done a few Montreal Alouette ones. So, anyway, number 10 is the 2004 Grey Cup upset Argos versus BC. I mean, it's a giant upset in a sense. And the upset is that, BC had the great Casey Printers as the MVP of the league. And for some strange reason, they decided not to put him in the Grey Cup game against the Argos, whereas Dave Dickinson was made to be the starter. And everyone was shocked that the Argos and BC did that. It's David Allen, who wore the double blue, would be facing his former squad, in which he won the 2000 Grey Cup, and which we'll talk about later. But anyhow, the 2004 Argos looked pretty classic. And, playing in Ottawa, a lot of fans probably would be BC fans. But yeah, the Argos took IBC and won the game. It was not that easy, but they did it. It, it mattered a lot. Number 9 is the 2019 Grey Cup between the Bombers and the Ticats. Winnipeg was near the bottom of the barrel in the Western Conference to make the playoffs. And Hamilton was 15-3. Hamilton was trying to end a 2 decades long Grey Cup drought and trying to give Southeastern Ontario a title. However, for some strange reason, the Bombers would put up a masterful performance, winning 33-12 and ending a 29-year Grey Cup drought that was the last one was 1990 when they thumped Edmonton 50-11. Andrew Harris was named the MVP of the game and Canadian MVP because in the Grey Cup you name your offensive player, your defensive player of the game, and your Canadian, most outstanding Canadian. Because it's a Canadian football thing. But Andrew Harris brought Winnipeg to the forefront. They took down Hamilton, and that actually started Winnipeg's basic dynasty of the 2020s and all of that. So good on them. Number 8 is the 2005 Grey Cup between the Edmonton Eskimos and the Montreal Alouettes. Montreal had a potent offense, of course, this guy being a big fan of them, and they were heavily favored. Edmonton would have to use two quarterbacks, Jason Moss and Ricky Ray. They didn't know who was the main guy, so Moss succeeded to Ray, and Ray put up numbers. Tony Tompkins with that big 90-plus yard touchdown kickoff return, and then, it was down to the last seconds. I think it was Edmonton who needed a field goal to tie to force overtime, and then Montreal got the ball first in overtime and got a touchdown, and then Edmonton's Jason Tucker made a great catch to tie the game. Edmonton scored a field goal to make it 38-35, and then Alouettes needed a field goal to keep the overtime going or a touchdown to win. And Edmonton's defense clamped down, and Montreal just couldn't do it, and Edmonton won the Grey Cup. So that's big. Number 7 is the 2002 Grey Cup between the Alouettes and Eskimos. Edmonton was in front of the home Commonwealth Stadium crowd. They were looking pretty damn good. And then all of a sudden, the Eskimos faltered to the Alouettes. Montreal had not won a Grey Cup as a city since 1977. Of course, then the 80s brought some financial instability. It changed to the Concorde's name. The fact that they had to fold days before the 1987 season, and then 1996 when Baltimore had to sell off their CFL US team because of the failed experiment, Montreal got the team. Montreal had Anthony Cafiello at the helm, and Don Matthews was a pretty good coach. He used to be an Eskimos head coach. Of course, Cavill threw the Jermaine Copeland for 99 yards, and then Copeland got the touchdown. Sorry, that was Pat Woodcock. When I said the Alouettes won, I called it Jermaine Copeland, but it's Pat Woodcock. My mistake. And then Pat Woodcock aside, Jermaine Copeland recovered an onside kick, and that was it. The Alouettes were the winners of the 2002 Grey Cup. Shocking a lot of people I know. Number 6 is the 1989 Grey Cup between the Saskey Roughriders and Hamilton Ticats. Hamilton were massive odds-on favorites. They looked pretty good in the regular season. They were going up the highway, up the QEW to Toronto and to the Rogers Centre for the first Grey Cup game played at that stadium. It would be thrilling and all that. Saskatchewan had to go through a Western semi and Western final periods, crushing the 16-2 Edmonton Eskimos. Saskatchewan had a dramatic win, capping an improbable playoff run. But yes, Saskey looked pretty impressive and all that. The 1989 Grey Cup is called the greatest Grey Cup around in history. So yeah, it was a battle royale. Saskey up by 7 late. Tony Champion contorting himself with the touchdown, and then Dave Ridgway final field goal to make it 43-40. They beat Hamilton. They did it. It was on their second Grey Cup in team history. 1966 was the other one. But the funny thing was that people said that Saskey actually bled a lot of money because they had to play on the roads these many times. And if they had just been knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, nothing big would have happened. Number 5 is the BC Lions of 2000. The BC Lions were 8-10 in the 18-game regular season, below 500, which should have been a red flag, meaning that this team was not going to win the Grey Cup. And Montreal was coming back after finally getting out of the Eastern Finals. They had been taken out by Toronto, Hamilton, and Hamilton in the playoffs every year. They finally got out of it, and now they had to beat BC. Could they beat the BC Lions? It's possible, but BC used their cloud, Damon Allen, and a retiring Louis Passaglio to win the game 28-26 as Montreal missed a 2-point convert to tie the game late. And it was just amazing how BC could have done it being below 500. Number 4 is the 2017 Grey Cup between the Argonauts and the Stamps. Calgary were the consensus favorites. They had won 13 games, they had an explosive offense, and they were looking for revenge after what happened in the previous Grey Cup in 2016 when Ottawa shocked Calgary for the title. And it was just like unreal and all of that. So Calgary looked pretty good. Calgary was marching down the field with 4 minutes left. They got to the 8-yard line, and then the receiver trying to make a move to fence the ball accidentally let it slip from his grip, a fumble, and DeVar Posey ran almost end zone to end zone for a touchdown. And it was just unbelievable how Calgary could have just taken a knee and then things would have been good. Ricky Ray's leadership for the Argos and Mark Trestman's coaching helped the Argos win the 2017 Grey Cup and put Calgary on the back burner again. Fortunately, though, Calgary did win the 2018 Grey Cup, so they had some happiness and all that. Number 3 is the 1994 Grey Cup between BC and Baltimore. Yeah, a lot of people thought that Baltimore was going to win the Grey Cup that year, coming from the American division. They had a Canadian-American battle. Well, North-South, sorry. And then, you got Baltimore getting all these guys that we would know later. Tracy Ham, Mike Pringle, Donald Ebugwe, Alvin Walton, and all them. Everyone wanted Baltimore to lose because obviously Baltimore was an American franchise and all that. And we're hoping BC would do it. But BC did not really have a strong offense either, as Ken Austin had to take over for Danny McManus, who was very ineffective for the Lions. So that's what ended up happening. Baltimore took on BC, and BC were underdogs on their own home soil. Fortunately for BC, they were allowed to use Crazy George, the cheerleader, to try to help the crowd out and all that. Baltimore looked pretty good. They had that lateral for a touchdown. They had a defensive touchdown. They had a few things going, but BC had done enough. And then Santa Pasaglia, with no time left, kicking a 35-yard field goal through the uprights. And BC won. And that actually brought ESPN2 into the forefront because they did the CFL and brought Gus Johnson to the forefront because that's who was doing that game for ESPN2. So that was pretty impressive too. Baltimore did get their own back in '95, winning the Grey Cup, but they would have to disband because of the CFL kicking tires at the American expansion. Number 2 is 1966 between Saskatchewan and Ottawa. Saskatchewan was a perennial underdog. They just couldn't win the big one. They took on Ottawa in the 54th Grey Cup, and Ottawa easily had the chance to win. They had Ron Lancaster. Well, Saskatchewan had Ron Lancaster at the pivot position, George Reed running the ball, who was the leading rusher of all time until Mike Pringle came along. Sosky did it. Whit Tucker did get a touchdown for the Rough Riders, but Saskatchewan ended up winning the game 29-14, winning the first ever title and giving Sasky the lovable underdog role for many years to come. And number 1 is Ottawa versus Edmonton, 1981 Grey Cup. It may not be an official upset, but it's one of the best Grey Cup games ever. The 1981 Grey Cup was a massive David Goliath matchup. The David was an Ottawa Rough Riders who had 5-11, ended up being second in the East. No crossover rule was in effect. So Ottawa got to play in the CFL playoffs, and they took on the Montreal Alouettes, who actually had to win on the final day of the season to avoid being tied with Toronto at 2-14, and Toronto making it in based off of the points system. So anyway, Ottawa had to sneak in everywhere. The Eskimos were the super Goliath because they were they were looking for their 5th straight Grey Cup. Or their 4th straight Grey Cup. Warren Moon was good at the pivot position. Ottawa had led for most of the game. It was huge. Edmonton went up 26-23, and it looked like it was over for the Eskimos. Well, Ottawa looked back. Ottawa did give up the points to make it 26-23, but a controversial double pass interference call on Tony Gabriel and the Edmonton defender actually ruined it because Gabriel's penalty meant that they lost possession of the ball. So yeah, Edmonton beat Ottawa 26-23, but people forget that Ottawa was up 20-1, and yes, you can score a 1-point thing in the CFL. But yeah, the Eskimos looked bad. Tom Wilkinson tried his best, and then Warren Moon came back and did what he could. And that's why we see upsets aplenty in the Grey Cup. Because of Warren Moon. And because it's the whole anything can happen philosophy. And pretty much it did. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.